Greetings, I'm Professor Hobo, and welcome to another HOBOTECH Knows You Got It product review. A few months back, I reviewed the Growatt Infinity 1500 power station, and it was a good first effort by the popular inverter brand. Fast forward to 2023, and Growatt has released their second power station called the Vita 550. This one has an upgraded lithium iron phosphate battery. But is it any good? Let's find out.
HOBOTECH.
Inside this Growatt is a 538 watt-hour lithium iron phosphate battery rated at 3,000 cycles to 80% capacity. As for size and weight, it's approximately 12 by 8 by 8 inches at around 18 pounds. As for the design, it's an all ABS plastic case all the way around with a pretty cool folding handle and a color LCD screen. Now, as for the inverter, this sports a 600 watt pure sine inverter with 3 AC outlets. As for ways to charge, there are 3. First, of course, is from AC wall or grid power. Now, the charger is built into this unit. It doesn't use an external brick, and that charger is capable of 500 watts of grid charging, which can top up the Vita 550 from 0 to 100% in about 1.6 hours, or 0 to 80% happens in less than an hour. That's pretty fast for a product of this size. Next, the Growatt can charge from 12 volt or 24 volt vehicle or an external 12 or 24 volt battery, and can charge the unit in about 6 to 7 hours total. Now, as for solar, the Growatt does come with an MC4 adapter cable, which goes to XT60. The solar on the 550 maxes out at 240 watts with a voltage range from 12 to 24 volts DC. Under optimal conditions, this lets you charge the unit all the way to full in about 2.5 hours. Not too shabby. Now, as for 12 volt outputs, the Vita 550 sports one 10 amp cigarette lighter accessory socket and a pair of 5521 barrel plug outputs, all regulated at 13.2 volts. Now, as for USB, the Growatt sports a single 100 watt USB-C power delivery output port. Note, this cannot be charged bidirectionally with USB. It does also have a single USB-A quick charge port, good for 18 watts, and a pair of standard USB-A ports, good for charging up your dinosaurs. As for other outputs, it does sport a 15 watt wireless charging pad on top, and Growatt also has an app that works with all of their solar generators, and we'll show you that here in a bit. As for the warranty, the Growatt offers a 2-year manufacturer's warranty. And of course, I took the Vita 550 here into my secret laboratory where I performed all kinds of crazy experiments on it, including, yes, let's all say it together now, a double-fisted battery capacity test. As for the results of the DC capacity test, the Vita 550 scored 503 watt hours out of 538 for an amazing 93% of rated capacity. This is also coming from a regulated 12 volt output at 8 amps, which makes the result even more impressive. Now, it did score a little bit lower on the AC capacity test, pulling 450 watt hours out of 538 for a still above average 84%. And with a lot of recent Sogens pulling only 70s or low 80 percentile numbers, this is a refreshing change. Note that their 1500 watt Growatt Infinity did poorly on the 12 volt test and only 81% on the AC test. So Growatt, whatever you guys did on this newest product, keep it up. Pure sine wave check under load. We have the Vita 550 under a 300 watt load, and this is what the sine wave looks like. So you got a pure sine wave at 120 volts, 60 hertz. Fantastic. Inverter capacity test. This is where we test to determine how much can we pull out of the 600 watt pure sine inverter. So let's start at 600 watts, work our way up until it stops. Okay, there we are at 500 watts. Let's take it up to 600. Okay, let's take it up to 700. Oh, it trips there right at 630. Now because this tripped it right over 600 watts, I'm going to add this little 250 watt electric heater on the side. And I'm going to turn my load down and see if we can actually get it to hold a little bit over 600 watts. Okay, there we are right now. It's at 575, 580, 590. Can we push it? No. It's obvious that the hard limit on this is 600 watts. If you try to exceed that whatsoever, it instantly shuts down the inverter. Next test is the 5-minute sustained cooling, or what I call the heat soak test, where we will run this at 600 watts, its maximum capacity, for at least 5 minutes to make sure that there are no issues with the inverter. There we are at 602 watts. Started the timer. Let's come back in 5 minutes. Okay, there we are. Just past 5 minutes. We're still pushing about 610 watts, and it ended that 5 minutes with no funky smells coming out of it, no smoking, no drinking, no carrying on. Didn't make any crazy noises, just the typical fan noise, which means this passed the test. So how loud is it? We're about a meter away. I have the inverter running on maximum, so maximum fan. Let's see how loud it is. So 52, 53 decibels, not bad. The next test is the max charge rate test. This is where we determine how much power can we push into the Vita 550. So first we're going to start with the AC power cord. Now this does not have an external power brick. The charger is built in, which is of course fantastic. So it comes with this nice heavy duty cord that goes into the wall. Let's plug it in and see how fast it charges. Now I'll let you know ahead of time, there is a fast charge button on the side. You need to press to let it know you should fast charge instead of regular charge. You can also go into the app, and there's a setting in the app that will allow you to quick charge. So I have everything maxed out as fast as it's gonna go. Let's go ahead and plug her in and see just how fast charging is. So it looks like the maximum charge rate on AC power is 489 watts. It is at 55% stated charge, so this is about as fast as it's ever going to get. Now 489 doesn't sound very fast. Then you have to think this has a 537 watt hour battery. That means this can charge from dead to full from AC power in just over 1 hour. That's fast. Okay, so what about 12 volt charging? The user manual says that it'll charge from 12 volts at 8 amps. And that's exactly what it's doing right now. I have my variable voltage charger set at 12 volts. It's pulling exactly 8 amps and it's charging at 85 watts. That's standard procedure for 12 volts because if you pull more than 10 amps on a cigarette lighter socket, you're probably gonna either melt it or blow a fuse. Now, let's try taking this up to car running voltage. Now this is at 12 volts right now. A lot of cars will run at 13.6 or 14.4 volts. So let's go ahead and turn up the voltage a little bit and see, does that make any difference with the charging? Interestingly enough, at 14 volts, it pulls 12 amps, and that is 146 watts. It says right there, 146 watts. It says right here, 14 volts at 12 amps. Now, if I reduce this to 13, it's pulling 12 amps, or 137 watts. Now let's back this down to 12 again. It limits itself to 8 amps. So this is very interesting. This is something you need to be aware of. If your cigarette lighter socket actually provides 13.6 or 14.4 volts, it's possible that the Growatt will pull 12 amps. And while that's not really dangerous in of itself, your car may have a 10 amp fuse. So you gotta be aware of that. If you plug the Growatt into your 12 watt cigarette lighter socket of your vehicle and it blows a fuse, it's because it's got a higher voltage going through that cigarette lighter socket. Now this may not be the case at all times, but I test for this because I've found a few solar generators that pull way too many amps. Some of them pull like 15 amps at 14 volts. And when your engine's running, the voltage is higher. So a lot of the times your vehicle will charge at 13.6 or 14.4, depending on the model and how old your vehicle is. So it could be putting up to 14.4 volts through that cigarette lighter socket. And in this case, it's gonna pull 12 amps, may blow a fuse. Just keep that in mind. However, if you're pulling from a 12 volt external battery, just the battery in itself, you don't have to worry about the limit because you're wiring it directly to the battery terminals. There's no cigarette lighter socket to melt. Now, what else is interesting in the manual is that the solar charge, it says, is 12 to 24 volts at 10 amps. So you're not going to find a solar panel that's going to do 12 volts. I know they say they're 12 volt panels, but they output at least 18 volts. So let's start at 18 volts and see what kind of amps we pull. All right, here we are at 18 volts. It is pulling 12 amps or charging at 195 watts. See right there, it says 196. That's what we're getting out of 18 volts, a typical solar panel, maximum of 12 amps. Now the Growatt itself is limiting the input to 12 amps. That's not this. This can go up to 20 amps. So just take note of that. So the maximum's 24 volts. So let's go up to 24 volts. Now interestingly, it's lowering the amps down to 10 amps. Let's turn this off. Back on again. All this does is it's like unplugging and plugging in your solar cables. It resets the controller to make sure we're getting the maximum. So it is limiting to 10 amps. So 24 volts at 9.6 amps, it's maxing out around 220 watts. Now it says here in a book by my finger, 240 watts max. So how in the world am I going to get 240 watts if it's not letting me put any more amps in? So let's go ahead and raise the voltage a little bit more. The fans are actually finally kicking on, which is interesting. Now up to this point, the fans didn't even kick on, so you're pretty much charging in silence. Okay, we found the magic sweet spot. At 27 volts, 9 amps, you're getting 243 watts of input. So there we are at the maximum watts. Let's go ahead and keep turning up the voltage and watch when this number drops to 0. So, all right, 30 volts, 8 amps, 248 watts. Now we're not getting much gain for voltage now because it's just dropping the amps as we raise the voltage. But there has to be an upper limit on the voltage, and there it is, 31 volts. So while the Growatt manual in the side of the product says 12 to 24 volts, you can push 30 volts into this, and that's important because that means you can put a larger solar panel on this. Now, for example, a 300 watt solar panel could output 30 volts at 10 amps. That's 300 watts. That means if you have a 300 watt, 250 watt, 220 watt panel, the VOC is less than 30 volts. Just look on the specifications of your panel. It'll tell you what the VOC is. The VOC is under 30 volts. You can use it on the Growatt. Do note that the upper limit on the amps is 12 amps. So if your solar panel can do 30 volts at 12 amps, that's going to be the maximum possible that you can get into the Growatt. Oh, if you want to know the noise this makes while charging, it's loudest when charging from AC wall power. It's the same 53 decibels as it is running the inverter test. Now, how about simultaneous charging? Can you charge from solar and the wall at the same time? Well, let's give it a shot. Okay, it's charging at 500 watts. Put this back up to 24 volts. And there's no change. So there is no simultaneous charging support on the Growatt. It maxes out at 492 watts of charging no matter what you do. Now what about a UPS feature? Most of these machines that have internal chargers have some kind of UPS charging. They at least support pass-through charging. So I have this power meter plugged into the AC inverter. I have the inverter turned on. You can see the light is on and the numbers are displaying here. I don't have the machine plugged into AC power. Watch what happens when I plug this into AC power. Okay, watch this light. Watch this as I plug this in. So I just plugged it into AC wall power and nothing happened. It's not charging. It's not doing anything. It's completely ignoring the fact that I plugged the AC power. So let's unplug it from the wall. Let's turn the inverter off. Okay, so the inverter's off. You saw that light go off. Now let's plug it into wall power. I hear a beep immediately as soon as I plug it in, and there it goes. It's charging. All right, let's go ahead and turn the inverter on. The inverter is not turning on. So this basically means not only does the Vita 550 not have a UPS feature, but you can't even charge it from AC wall power and have the inverter on at the same time. It's one or the other. So if you're charging from the wall, you can't turn the inverter on. If you have the inverter on, you can't charge from the wall. Now, on larger, more expensive products, there's a little relay in there, and I always call it the UPS relay, that allows it to pass through power from the AC wall to the outlets. And that only works if the inverter is on, because the inverter has to be on for that to function, because the inverter is the charger. Now, this does have an inverter charger built in, but it doesn't have that switching relay that allows it to charge and discharge In other words, invert and charge at the same time. So it's one or the other. It's either an inverter or it's a charger, but it can't do it simultaneously. And it's unfortunate because that means you can't even pass through power. So if you have this plugged into the wall, the inverter simply does not work. Now, because that's the case, I'm gonna have to plug this back in and find out, does it at least pass through DC? Okay, the solar's hooked back up. It is charging at 219 watts. Let's see if the inverter works now. Okay, inverter comes on, no problem. What about DC power? DC power comes on, no problem. What about USB? USB comes on, no problem. So this does have full DC pass-through charging. So if you're charging the Growatt with solar, you can use the inverter, you can use a 12-volt output, you can use the USB all at the same time. That's not a problem. The only problem is when you're charging this thing from the wall, it will cut you off of the inverter. 12-volt output test. The Growatt has a 12-volt cigarette lighter socket rated at 10 amps. Let's see if we can pull 10 amps. And there you have it. It pulls 10 amps at 12.3 volts. Now the Growatt has a 100-watt power delivery output, which is great because you can use that to charge MacBooks, laptops, and things like that, high-end tablets. I always test these power delivery outputs because sometimes they say it's 100 watts when it's really 60. So I have this power bank is 74% charged, which is low enough to do this test. I have a 5 amp 100 watt cable plugged into the output. Let's turn it on and see what kind of power it pushes into the power bank. And you can see right here, it is outputting 91 watts and the power bank is actually charging at 90 watts. Now that is a couple of watts low. It could be because this battery is almost charged up, but anything over 90 watts is going to be considered a pass on this test. Now what about wireless charging? This does have a wireless charging pad on top. I have a fancy new phone that now supports wireless charging. So let's see if it works. Boot-oop, and then you saw it pop up for a split second saying that it's wirelessly charging. Now something interesting to note about this is that I don't have the USB turned on. I don't have 12 volt turned on. But the wireless charger is on. That means anytime this unit's turned on, the wireless charging pad is live. Because the way these work, they use electromagnets to send electricity to your phone. So you don't want to stick your wallet or purse up here, anything with credit cards or chips in it, because it could possibly wipe them out. So anytime this power button is on, don't set anything up here except something you want to charge. And of course the Growatt does have an app, which I've installed here on my tablet. Very basic stuff here. You've seen this before if you watch my other Growatt review. It's the same app. Nothing's really changed. They've updated a little bit. So let's just go directly to settings. Battery protection. This actually allows you to select how many percent of the battery you want to discharge down to. Now they recommend 10%, so it will reserve 10% of the battery. Now that's for extended life. I find it kind of funny that you can set it to 80%. That means you'd only be using from 80 to 100% of the battery. But hey, it lets you do it. It lets you set the temperature. This is supercharge. Now, what I was mentioning before, you can put it on slow charge or supercharge. I left it on supercharge for my testing. You can turn on and off the beep. Thank you, hallelujah. Inverter standby time, that's how long the inverter will stay on before it shuts off. Screen off time, I always set mine to never. You can change your device name. You can do firmware upgrades. Now on the main screen, this is the output screen. You can see the battery state of charge, how long it's gonna run. You can remotely turn this unit off, but you can't turn it back on once you do that. Shows you input and output watts, temperature of the unit, state of charge of the battery, how bright you want the light, turn on and off AC, DC, USB, even shows you what wattages are coming out of the USB ports. Now on the input side, same thing. This down here will actually give you a graph as solar comes in, so it gives you an idea of solar that you're doing during the day. So while it's charging, it tells you down here, AC 493, tells you right there 493. It says it's going to take 26 minutes to finish charging this, and you get a nice little animation to let you know that it's charging. And that's all she wrote. Musician's favorite amp interference test. I got this PV keyboard amp hooked up. All I gotta do is push the button. All the knobs are turned up, nothing's plugged in. We're gonna get a standard amount of hiss, but does it make noise? Is there a buzz that comes out of the speaker? That usually happens on cheaper, lower end products. Now, I have not done this test yet. I don't know if it's going to pass or not. I'm going to think probably not, because these little tiny inverters in here are usually pretty noisy. But I've been wrong before. Let's find out. So 3, 2, 1. Hey, it's actually pretty clean. That's a nice surprise. So this definitely passed the amplifier test. Last but not least, you noticed that it has a light on it. So let's go ahead and test to see if it has the infamous SOS feature to call down our little buddies upstairs. So let's give it one press and see what happens. Okay, one press, it's pretty bright. Second press, a steady flash. That's not SOS. Press 3, it turns itself back off. Are you trying to tell me that the Growatt Vita 550 is the first solar generator in existence with a light on it that doesn't have an SOS feature? Do note that in the app, you have this slider which allows you to turn up and down the brightness of the light, which is actually kind of neat. So at least if you want to have the light dimmer and you don't want it as bright, you can at least set that through the app. I don't know why you'd ever need a blinking light on a solar generator. I guess if you're having a rave or a Halloween party, there you go, you got your strobe light. So what do I think about the Growatt Vita 550? I think this is a quality bang for your buck product, as it offers what most folks need in this size of a power station at a competitive price. If EcoFlow and Bluetti had a love child, it would come out and look like a Growatt. It's fast charging, it has a good size lithium iron phosphate battery, a quiet inverter, all the USB and wireless charging options, app control, and a light without the silly SOS. However, the elephant in the room is that lack of UPS feature or even AC pass-through charging. Now, if you don't need an uninterruptible power supply or to run AC appliances while this thing charges from the grid, then you won't really care about this emission. Folks that plan to mostly charge with solar probably won't care either, as DC pass-through charging works just fine. However, the competition does offer this feature in their mid-range products, and it's really the only major oversight by Growatt. Now, they're going to be reading the comments in this video, so if you want to voice your opinion here, I'm sure they're going to be listening. Product price. The Vita 550 retails for $529, and it's currently on their launch sale from now until the end of January for $429. However, of course, I scored a discount code from Growatt that will knock the price down to $389 for a limited time. That's only 64 cents per watt or 72 cents per watt hour. That's a very competitive price for something with a built-in charger and an app. Now, speaking of competition, this 5 to 600 watt LFP segment is pretty hot. You have Bluetti's 600 watt EV3A that's about 40% cheaper than this, but also has only half the battery. EcoFlow's 500 watt River 2 Max has more bling and a longer warranty, but costs $100 more. Now this slips the Growatt conveniently right in the middle of the two biggest names in LFP power stations. Now who's this product aimed at? When you're talking 600 watts, you're talking limited support for appliances. Don't expect to run your Keurig, Instant Pot, microwave, or air conditioner on this model. That's not what they're designed for. If you need to power a small 3-cup coffee machine, or a desktop computer, laptop, TV, fans, or a small refrigerator, this will do the job. It's also great for charging batteries, tablets, cell phones, and alike, along with a 12-volt compressor fridge, which I have many to choose from, for sale at hobotech.tv/Amazon. Oh, and since the fans on this are so whisper quiet, this is also a great unit for CPAP machine use, as it should actually get you by a couple of nights. And since the inverter is clean, you can actually use this for small audio amplifiers, which will allow you to rock out at your campsite and annoy the crap out of all your neighbors. Now, what about solar? Growatt does offer their own 200 watt portable folding solar panel in a bundle with this product, which will work perfectly. However, if you want something more robust and less expensive, I would recommend the Bouge RV 180 watt or 200 watt glass panels, which can be found again on hobotech.tv/Amazon under solar kits. So if you're interested in the Growatt Vita 550, The link and discount code are going to be in the description of this video below. I'm also going to put a link here at the bottom of the screen that you can type in manually, along with a QR code over here that you can scan on your mobile that'll take you on over to the Growatt website where you can check out the Vita 550. Thanks for watching. If you learned something today, don't forget to give me that thumbs up below. And if you're not a subscriber already, you know what to do. That's it for now. Till next time.
Odin commands you to like and subscribe, and clean my litter box.
If your search for a Sultan is a pain in the neck, go to YouTube and watch HOBOTECH, cause he's a testing this and he's a probing that. He's even been probing Odin's cat. If you wanna get all the Sultan back, go to HOBOTECH. Yeah!
RV Golf Guy, Von Rupp, Brian Loopers, John Stason, Sirocco, Dr. Steve Eisenberg.